Ooh. Yeah, buddy.
Well, that was exciting, wasn't it?
And if you've never experienced that feeling before, or if you just want to experience more of that feeling, you need to check out this video on my top 3 favorite topwater baits for summertime. Let's get started. Okay, y'all, so if you haven't figured it out by now, this video is all about topwater, specifically my top 3 favorite topwater baits for the summertime. And I guarantee you, if you don't use these baits, or maybe if you use them incorrectly, you don't have a lot of confidence in them, so you're not using them a lot, whatever it is, I guarantee you, if you watch this video, pick these baits up, you're going to catch more bass this summer. And not only are you going to catch more bass, you're going to catch bigger bass, guaranteed. Before we get into this video though, there's just a few things I want to let y'all know. Number one, this video is brought to you by the one and only Ohio River Outdoors in Williamstown, West Virginia. Every bait I'm going to be talking about today is available at that store, and if you haven't been there, you need to go check this place out. If you're a fisherman, this place is absolutely a dream. It's bigger than any Bass Pro or any outdoor store that you're ever going to walk into. I promise you, it's the biggest bait and tackle store that you're going to walk into on the East Coast. And if you don't believe me, go check it out. And if I'm wrong, if it's not everything I exaggerated it to be, leave all the hate comments in here. Tell everybody that I'm full of crap, because I promise you, you will be amazed by this place if you've never been there. The second thing I want to talk to you all about is please hit that like and subscribe button. It's a good free way to support the channel, and it really helps. And finally, before we get started, let's go over some objectives about this video. I'm going to chapter everything down below, so if you want to fast forward through anything, it's going to be labeled down here. Don't feel like you have to watch the whole video. But in today's video, I'm going to talk about the Zara Spook, I'm going to talk about frogs, I want to talk about poppers. Not only am I going to talk about the baits, I'm going to talk about the rod and reel combination, the line selection. I'm going to talk about any adjustments I like to make to the baits, or special conditions I like to use the baits in. And finally, I'm going to talk about the retrieve. So let's get started, and let's start off with the Zara Spook. So if you've been in bass fishing any period of time, you're probably already pretty well aware what these baits are in my hand. The Zara Spook. And before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know I'm already well aware that there's many other brands out there other than the Zara Spook, and they all work fine. Don't think that when I'm talking in this video that I'm only referring to the Zara Spook. There are other top quality baits out there that will work just as good. So if you've been in bass fishing for any period of time, you're probably pretty aware of a stick bait or a walking bait of some sort, like a Zara Spook. And if you don't use them, go buy a few today. You have to have them, especially this time of year. They produce quality bites, and they typically pull out the bigger bass that are in the area. And this time of year, they can be absolute killers on almost any body of water. So the first thing I want to start off with on the Zara Spook or any walking bait is my rod and reel combination. Whenever it comes to picking out the rod that I'm going to use, and it doesn't have to be one of these rods particularly, one of my favorite topwater rods is the St. Croix rod. So don't think that it has to be one of these Brandon Cobb rods. It's just one of the ones that I had pulled out today. St. Croix is a great brand. If you don't have one of those, give them a check. But anyways, when it comes to my rod and reel combination, I like a good medium heavy rod, and I like a fast 7/6-1 or quicker reel, because with a walking bait like this, number one, the bass are going to take a real aggressive action at the bait. It's going to happen really fast, and they're going to try to pull the bait down as quick as they can. So when you set the hook, you need all the backbone you can to wrench that fish out of the deeps and get it right back to your boat. Whenever it comes to the reel I like to use, the reason I like a high-speed reel for a walking bait, and all the baits we're going to talk about, I'm going to want a similar speed reel. And the reason behind that is because with these baits, you know, you're going to cast out there, and during your retrieve, when you're walking it back to you, you're going to have a lot of slack left in your line. So when these fish grab this, and it's going to happen really fast, they're just going to dive down as quick as they can with your bait. If you can't catch up to them very quickly, you're going to stand a chance of losing that fish. And that's not something I want to do, and that's not something you want to do. When it comes to my line selection, I like a good high test monofilament line. There is no reason to throw lighter lines with this. And the reason that I like monofilament, and I've said this in other videos, is because whenever it comes to buoyancy, monofilament is a little bit more buoyant. So it helps keep your bait on top of the water, and it helps keep the nose from diving down. So monofilament not only is going to float a little bit better and give your bait a little bit better of an action in the front, but it also has a little bit of stretch to it. So whenever you have these extremely aggressive bites, you're not going to pull the bait right out of the fish's mouth. Whenever it comes to any type of adjustments I like to make to my Zara Spooks, and this is pretty specific to the Zara Spook world. You know, I don't mess around with a whole lot of the other brands, but for whatever reason, most Zara Spooks don't come with great hooks on them. So the first thing I wanted to do is go buy some good quality treble hooks and replace with my Zara Spook. And finally, when it comes to the Zara Spook, the retrieve. And there's multiple different retrieves you can use with this bait, but the three that are my favorite, and I'll even go over how I start and which ones I pick and how I make this selection. But my three favorite retrieves for a Zara Spook is number one, just a steady retrieve back with a nice tight walking action. That will produce, especially in the right conditions, will produce some of the best bites you're going to get, and it's really efficient. I guess I'll go ahead and touch on the conditions while I talk about these. So the conditions for that is either early in the morning, you know, when the fish are being a little bit more aggressive, or whenever there's overcast, maybe a little bit of rain or some fog in the area. Just a nice steady retrieve back. Whenever those fish are being more aggressive, that is the retrieve that I like to use. The second retrieve that I really like is, again, you know, just cast it out there. I like to do about 3 or 4 good tight walks and then do a pause. 3 or 4 good tight walks, then a pause. 3 or 4 good tight walks, then a pause. And after I get out of the strike zone, I reel it right back to me. I don't waste a whole lot of time where I don't think I want to get bites. In this particular situation, you know, especially if you're on the bite earlier in the morning with a Zara Spook and you're doing the tight retrieve, like I was just talking about, the steady retrieve back, and you're getting a lot of bites and they start to fall off, you switch to a retrieve like this, and you're probably going to start picking up a few more fish. I will say, just as we all know, a lot of times the top water bite will die off as the day goes on. But whenever you switch to a retrieve like this, it works really well. It works really good at getting those bass that are kind of dying down on the feed. You know, they're not as aggressive at this point. And then finally, the third retrieve that I like to use is a real slow retrieve. And I don't know how many of you guys have messed around with this, but a lot of times if the bite really falls off, but I know that I can still catch them because I'm still getting blow-ups and they're really missing the bait, I'm not getting as many bites as I was before, I like to just throw the spook out there, let it sit, let all the riffles clear. And whenever all those riffles clear, give it a couple subtle twitches. Let all the riffles clear, couple subtle twitches. Let all the riffles clear, couple subtle twitches. All the riffles clear, couple subtle twitches. Now, that, again, I guess the best way to look at this is I went from a more aggressive to a more finesse tactic. So, in this situation, again, if the bite has fallen off, but you still think that you can get bass with a topwater bite, this is a perfect retrieve to try to go after, especially if you can get it up against cover or underneath docks or next to laydown, stuff like that. The longer you can keep it there, the better off you are, especially as it starts to get warmer. You know, those bass are going to be down there looking at it. And if you're not right in the active feeding period, if you just zoom right past them, they're going to look at it and go, you know, that looks good, but I don't feel like chasing it. You know, I ate this morning. But man, if it stops and sits right there in front of them for long enough, it's just going to agitate them. They're not going to be able to handle it, and they're going to go after your bait. So now for the second bait, and I hope that all of you already have one of these in your tackle box, but if you don't, make sure you go get a frog today. Just like the Zara Spook, go pick up one right now before you go back to the lake. Make sure you get a frog because it's so versatile, it's so weedless, it gives so many different presentations. It's an absolute killer this time of year, not only first thing in the morning or when it's raining, but it can be an absolute killer all day long, even in the blistering hot sun. A few reasons I really like a frog. Number one, they're probably one of the most weedless baits you're ever going to throw, so you can throw it against almost any cover, because with the way the hook's set, it's not going to get wrapped up in hardly anything. It's really hard to get a frog snagged. It's honestly probably one of the most weedless baits that you can throw. The second reason I really like a frog is because you can make multiple different presentations with it. And when I say that, I mean you can either imitate a frog, or if the fish are biting heavy on bluegill or some kind of bait fish, you know, that are tucked up in some grass and stuff like that, you can also mimic some bait fish just fluttering at the top of the water. It's actually probably one of the most well-known theories now in bass fishing whenever it comes to a frog bite, that most of them, people believe that the bass are actually going after some kind of bait fish or some kind of bluegill, something like that, shimmering on top of the water more so than the bass going after an actual frog. Now, I'm not going to say that whenever you're throwing a frog that you're not sometimes mimicking an actual frog and that the bass isn't trying to eat a frog. I think that is really the case, especially when it's raining. But after the bluegill spawn, whenever there's, little bluegill everywhere, this in a bluegill color can be absolutely lethal, because I do agree that I would say 80% or more of your frog bites are fish thinking that they're going after some kind of bait fish, not necessarily a frog. So for those reasons, a frog is probably, out of all three of these baits I'm going to talk about, a frog is probably my favorite. So without wasting any more of your all's time on why I like a frog, let's talk about what kind of rod and reel I like to use. Today's rod and reel, this is a loose combo. This is like $100 combo you can get at Ohio River Outdoors if you're just getting into frogs. I have another one in my rod box. Again, it's a St. Croix, but you don't necessarily have to have a really expensive high-end rod. For me personally, depending on what type of frog I'm going to throw, if I'm throwing a smaller frog like this, I use this rod and reel combination here, which is a medium heavy rod. The reason I like a medium heavy fast action tip is because for these smaller frogs, it makes it easier for me to zing them out there. I have more control with the accuracy of my cast. Whenever it comes to like my other setup, whenever it comes to a bigger frog, especially if I'm fishing near heavy vegetation or somewhere where there's going to be a lot of stuff I have to pull the bass through, I like to stick with just a plain heavy rod. The reason I like a heavy rod, like I just said, is to not only pull that fish out of whatever it's going to get you wrapped up in, but also because with those bigger, more heavy-duty frogs, there's a lot of plastic to get that hook through to get into the bass's mouth. So with a heavier setup, you can really wrench those hooks right into the roof of that fish's mouth and not have near as much of a chance of losing that fish. When it comes to my reel setup, same as what I just said with the Spook, I like something faster. 7.5 to 1 or quicker is what you need to go with whenever it comes with a frog, and it's for the same reasons. You're going to have a lot of slack out, and whenever the bass grabs this bait, it's going to happen quickly, and it's going to try to go down with it. So the more of that slack you can reel up to not only one, get a good hook set in, but two, get that bass back to you, the less likely you're going to lose that fish. When it comes to my line setup, on my lighter setup that I have here, 50% of the time I throw monofilament, like an 18-pound monofilament. The other 50% of the time I'll trade it out with braid, depending on what I'm fishing around. Like today, I'm at North Bend. There's not a lot of lily pads or grass that I'm competing against, so I'm not too worried about monofilament breaking off. But if you're fishing somewhere around a lot of lily pads or a lot of heavy grass, something like that, there is absolutely no reason not to throw a 40 or a 30-pound braid whenever you're using a frog. The fish aren't going to see it. Don't worry about that. It's not going to cause any issues, and it's also going to prevent you from breaking off whenever that fish gets wrapped around grass or stuff like that. And for those of you that maybe don't know, grass is also extremely sharp and will leave a lot of abrasions in your line. So if you're fishing around heavy vegetation, you're only going to cause yourself issues if you don't use braid. So do yourself a favor, make sure you put some braid on your rod and reel setup. That way you don't break off right in the middle of catching that next 7 or 8 pounder that your first 7 or 8 pound fish you're ever going to catch. You don't want to break off because you didn't have the right line on. Finally, when it comes to the frog, my retrieve, it's a lot similar to the Spook. It's almost identical to the Spook. I either like to do like a nice tight little twitch back to me. Obviously it's not going to make the big walking action, but just a nice steady twitch back to me with a subtle pause every now and then. Or I like to use just the pop, 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 pause, pop, 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 pause, or almost dead sticking it. Same thing, if the bite was there earlier in the day and it falls off, throw it out there, throw it next to a log, throw it next to the cover, and leave. The longer you can leave it in the strike zone and the slower you can twitch it back to you, the better off you're going to be. So when it comes to my retrieve, again, it's just similar variations of what I talked about with the Zara Spook. So that's it for the frog. Let's hop into the final bait, the popper, and then we'll wrap this video up. I have a few things at the end I want you guys to check out, so stay tuned for that. And last but not least, a popper. And the reason that a popper, or the reasons that a popper is one of my top 3 topwater baits is because, number one, whenever the conditions start to get a little bit more aggressive outside and you're dealing with more of a ripple on top of the water because of either wind or current or pleasure boat traffic, whatever it is, the pop-R can make enough vibration and noise on top of the water to still draw out those bass's attention whenever something like a buzzbait or a choppo might be too aggressive for what the bass are looking for that day, or whenever they're not willing to chase a bait as much that day. This bait can still make all of the noise and be right in the strike zone for a really long period of time. The second reason I like a pop-R is because it's really good at standing out from the crowd. Whenever you're at a tournament or you're in a tournament situation or even a highly pressured lake where there's going to be a lot of other boaters, and you know that people have figured out that the topwater bite's on, because let's be real with each other, most bass anglers are going to start with the topwater bite before they move on to anything else, because it's one of the most universally favored ways to catch bass. So whenever everybody's on the same topwater bite that you're on, and they're already using Zara Spooks or they're using frogs and more subtle quiet baits, using something like a pop-R that's going to make a bunch of noise and be more aggressive can really stand out from the crowd and get you a few bites that everybody else isn't getting, because it's going to help set you apart from everybody else. That doesn't just apply to a pop-R like this one. There's also pop-R style frogs that if you're on a really good frog bite, that you know everybody else is on that same frog bite, a good pop-R frog can make a big difference in the same conditions that one of these can. When it comes to my rod and reel setup, I don't have my rod pulled out because I wasn't using one of those today. But when it comes to my rod and reel setup, it's virtually the exact same setup that I like with a Zara Spook. I like a heavier rod. I like something with a moderate to a fast action tip for multiple different reasons. The reason I like a fast action tip is because pop-Rs are typically lighter than spooks. So a fast action tip to me makes it easier to cast. It doesn't really have so much to do with the hook set. But the reason I like a heavier rod, just like with the spook or with the frog, is because those bites are going to be aggressive. The fish is going to take a lot of line down really quick. So your ability to set that hook and really set the hook hard is going to make all the difference in whether or not you get these fish to your boat. Whenever it comes to my line setup, it's again similar to the spook. I like maybe a slightly lighter monofilament. So with the Zara Spook, somewhere between 18-20 pound test monofilament's what I like. With a pop-R, I'll stick to something in the 14 to 16 pound test range. And again, that all goes back to the fact that these baits are a little bit lighter than the spook, so it makes it easier to cast them out whenever you use a slightly lighter line. Don't get me wrong, I think that you do take a little bit more of a risk, especially with a topwater bite, by lightening up your line, but placement of the bait and cast accuracy is also really important, and you're never going to get the bites to begin with if you can't place the bait where you need it. When it comes to the retrieve, it's just a variation, multiple variations of one retrieve, but similar to the frog, I like to throw it out there and just do nice, subtle twitching motions back to me with a few occasional just big, heavy, aggressive pops to really make that thing stand out. And then I just like to freeze it. As soon as I do like a couple big, heavy pops, stop it. Let it stop for a second and then just start twitching it back to you, where it's just pop, 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 and then a couple big ones and pause, kill the whole thing. And a lot of times you're going to draw out your aggressive reaction bites that way. The only other really variation I like to do with that is just a pop, pop, pause, pop, pop, pause, pop, pop, pause, pop, pop, pause. And whenever I'm using a pop-R, I usually start off with the first one I just mentioned because it's a little bit more aggressive, and then I move to this version of the retrieve. And typically, if you're going to get a pop-R bite, or at least in my experience, one of those two retrieves is going to get it for you. Outside of that, there's really no modifications. I think I forgot to mention this with the frogs. There's really no modifications other than, depending on what brand you get, replacing the hooks. And that's the same thing with crankbaits or the spook or a lot of other baits. And I don't think I did mention this with the frogs. The only modification that I like to make to the frogs is occasionally I like to trim up one side of my skirting material to give it more of a walking action. There's really no need to replace. You can buy different hooks for these frogs, but I don't replace the hooks in my frogs, especially with the Spro frogs. They already come with super sharp, durable hooks. But whenever it comes to spooks and pop-Rs, for the most case, most of the ones you buy out there, you're going to want to replace your hooks. A lot of them come with cheaper hooks, and to me, it's just not a risk, especially if you're fishing tournaments. It's not a risk worth making, especially if you're going after not just tournaments, but if you're going after your next PB, it's also just a risk not worth making to me. Okay, y'all, that's it for this video. Remember, every bait I talked about today is available at Ohio River Outdoors in Williamstown, West Virginia. Once again, I will say it's the best, most amazing outdoor store you're ever going to experience. It's the biggest one on the East Coast. There's nothing official saying that, but I promise you, if you go there, you'll get what I'm saying. It's the biggest bait and tackle store you're ever going to walk into. So make sure you check that place out. My name is Jordan, and if you enjoyed this experience, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.